Hi everyone, it's Dr. Ramani and welcome back to this YouTube channel on narcissism, narcissistic relationships, and healing from narcissistic relationships. In today's video, I'm going to take on something I know more than a few of you have read about and probably thought about, so let's talk about it. How many of you have ever heard about the Dunning-Kruger effect? So what's this fancy effect all about? Have you ever worked with someone who is actually pretty unqualified or even downright incompetent, but they overestimate their ability level, like they really think that they are competent? Or you have a family member who thinks they're really good at something, but actually are not, but assert that they are. It's really difficult when you run into this dynamic at work, because the person who thinks that they are competent may be walking around, talking, behaving as though they really are qualified and competent, but are not. And frankly, that might mean that if you're working with them, you're having to work harder to make up for their failings or deal with the discomfort of knowing that they're being paid the same as you and they really don't know what they're doing. But goodness, they show up so confident and think that they're doing it right. And the fact is, if you did give them feedback, they would not take it well, because they really do have a cognitive bias in which they believe they are actually competent. Interestingly, the most unqualified and most incompetent folks, the ones at the bottom, are the ones who overestimate their abilities the most, and may actually be even more confident in their skills than someone who actually is more competent and more qualified. These people who are experiencing this so-called Dunning-Kruger effect may step up and act like they know what they're talking about, which means, for example, that if the management in your company is ignorant themselves or just simply not paying attention, that they may believe that the confident incompetent who is willing to step up and take the podium actually knows what they're talking about. Now, ironically, the flip side of the Dunning-Kruger effect is that people who really do know their stuff, really know it and find it easy to do, that they've mastered it, actually underestimate how difficult a task is. So there's not only the risk of these people at the very top underselling themselves, but also making the dangerous assumption that others can do the task as easily as them. Think of someone who's a magnificent cook. They cook like a chef, and they don't recognize that it doesn't come as easily to everyone else. So they almost devalue their own culinary skills. So there's not only what probably looks like a humility piece to this, but a person may also not fully recognize how hard the task is for others and may not offer proper support or be quite surprised when they can't do it. Now you may be thinking, isn't this every narcissistic person out there? Not necessarily. Some narcissistic people are actually very qualified and competent, so they aren't overestimating their abilities. But this pattern, especially the side of this where the side of the Dunning-Kruger effect, where a person who is unqualified and genuinely believes that they're able to do the task and do it well and talks like they do, all of that together is called the Dunning-Kruger effect. This effect is the work of two researchers at Cornell University who observed that people were doing this thing that they were studying in their experimental studies. And not only are they ignorant, they are ignorant that they are ignorant. Welcome to the internet, which is a bunch of ignorant people who don't know that they're ignorant. Now remember, when this research was originally done, 1999, the internet was not the mess it is now. Now, lots of narcissistic folks have a Dunning-Kruger vibe. They can be unqualified and they're almost delusionally grandiose and think that they can do the task. Now, while all people in this Dunning-Kruger effect tend to do poorly with feedback because they genuinely believe that they're competent or they're right, a narcissistic Dunning-Kruger person would bite your hand off. Now, the Dunning-Kruger effect in a narcissistic person would be really magnified by the grandiosity, making it almost unchangeable. In a non-narcissistic Dunning-Kruger person, we're more likely seeing someone who doesn't have all of the information they know to recognize that they actually don't know, and they sort of live in their ignorant bubble. but they may not necessarily be grandiose. They just may simply not be able to appraise the situation accurately. Now, Dunning-Kruger people lack insight and they lack self-awareness. Now, these are also two patterns that we always see in narcissism. But there are some people out there where we see the Dunning-Kruger effect who actually might be empathic, well-regulated, even nice enough people, except for this one sort of hole in their vision. And because they lack insight, they don't know to ask for help or guidance when they need it, which again, if you're working with them, it makes your life much, much harder. Dunning-Kruger is personally a major pet peeve of mine. When I see incompetent folks walk around the world like they get things and they understand things, it wastes so much time and it can actually result in workplace gaslighting. If you are the one who has to work with the incompetent Dunning-Kruger person, you may become exhausted because many times everyone else has fallen for how confident this person is and how much they believe they can do it. Now, it's interesting to me that Dunning-Kruger is a recent theoretical model. It derives from existing social psychology sort of constructs like optimism bias. But I often wonder, are we in a world in which more and more we just tell people they're great to bolster their self-esteem when in fact they're not? I ran into people like that all the time when I was a professor. When I would have a student who gave me clearly a D-level paper, and then they would get upset telling me they were getting A's from their other professors. Now the pendulum has swung probably too much from what it used to be. And the fact is though, we should not be pumping up self-esteem, but we should be training self-awareness, especially in that bottom 25% who seem to think they are in the top 5%. Dunning-Kruger and narcissism are an interesting overlay. And I think that the lack of self-awareness and grandiosity and underestimate of their impact on others and overestimate of their abilities, that all means that narcissistic people never accurately judge themselves. But I think this may be separate from the Dunning-Kruger stuff. The narcissistic personality just doesn't have accurate self-appraisal. In my career, I have worked with plenty of Dunning-Kruger folks, and it felt a little gaslighty to work with them only because they just didn't get how unqualified they were and really believed they were, which would definitely put me in the uncomfortable position of trying to find a gentle way to tell them they didn't know what they were doing while also respecting HR guidelines. And even if you did, they still didn't get it. When you're in the presence of this sort of Dunning-Kruger effect person, you feel like you're losing your mind and you wonder if you are missing something. You aren't, and sadly, even after reading the literature on this, it doesn't seem there's much you can do. You can document, you can figure out workarounds, and hopefully find a way to never work with the person again. It's really awful. It's hard enough to work with narcissistic folks, but then if you were to add the sort of Dunning-Kruger group of people out there in addition to the narcissistic people, it's a wonder that any of us are able to remain sane at work. Listen, know your limitations. It may be the wisest thing anyone could ever do. Because if we think ignorant people are dangerous, the only thing more dangerous than ignorant people are ignorant people who don't know they're ignorant, or incompetent people who don't know they're incompetent, or unqualified people who don't know they're unqualified. Folks, that's the Dunning-Kruger effect. And while it kind of looks and smells and breathes like narcissism, it's not grandiosity. It's just sort of they really, really don't get it. And there are few things more maddening. Hope that helps, and thanks again.